I inherited the farm from my grandfather, a modest spread on the edge of town where the roads turned from asphalt to dust. 6 acres of soil that carried the memory of generations, fertilized by sweat, sacrifice, and the kind of stubbornness that only farmers know. It wasn't flashy. No white picket fences, no fountain out front. Just weathered barns, fields that reached to the horizon, and peace. That peace ended the day the Maple Grove Estates development broke ground across the fence. It started with the sound of construction, distant at first like thunder rumbling on the edge of a storm. Then came the noise of saws, nail guns, and the growl of machinery flattening earth that once held wildflowers. Where deer used to graze now stood rows of identically painted houses, each with trimmed lawns, solar panels, and HOA flags waving like a new kingdom had arrived. And at the head of that kingdom stood Karen Wexley. If you've ever met someone who introduced themselves with their title rather than their name, you already know the type. President of the Maple Grove Homeowners Association, she declared the first time we crossed paths at the property line. She wore oversized sunglasses, bright white sneakers, and held a clipboard like a weapon. Her bob haircut looked sharp enough to cut glass. "Your property," she said, eyeing my tractor like it was a rusted eyesore, "is directly adjacent to our community's entrance. We're aiming to uplift the visual appeal of the neighborhood. I'm sure you understand." I didn't reply. Just leaned against the fence post, wiping sweat off my brow and waiting for her to get to the point. Karen pursed her lips. "We're organizing a community barbecue next weekend. Something charming. Family-friendly. It would benefit everyone if it had a touch of rustic ambience. Your fields would be perfect." She said it like she was offering me a favor. Like it was a privilege to have her HOA set foot on my land. "I'm not part of Maple Grove," I replied. Her smile didn't falter. "Oh, don't be silly. We're all neighbors. We should collaborate. I'll handle everything. You just keep the gates open." I didn't answer. I didn't agree. I didn't sign anything. I figured that was the end of it. I was wrong. The following Saturday, I returned from the farmer's market in town just as the sun hit its peak. I was exhausted, sunburnt, and ready to put my boots up. But as I turned down my long gravel driveway, something felt off. The gate was open. And beyond it, chaos. Rows of parked SUVs had turned my hayfield into a parking lot. A large white tent stood over what used to be my tomato patch. Kids ran wild through the cornrows, and someone had set up folding tables near my chicken coop. Smoke curled from 3 gas grills, and the sound of pop music clashed violently with the chirping cicadas. I parked my truck, stunned, and stepped out. "Hey there!" A middle-aged man in khakis waved at me while holding a burger. "You must be the farmer. Karen told us you were cool with us using the land. This is amazing, so authentic." Authentic. I walked past him without a word, heart pounding. My boots kicked through paper cups and plastic forks. I passed a woman letting her dog relieve itself near my storage shed. Teenagers had dragged lawn chairs up onto my flatbed trailer. A cooler full of soda dripped ice melt into a patch of struggling lettuce. I found Karen sitting at a folding table decorated with gingham, sipping lemonade from a mason jar like she was the queen of the county fair. "Oh good," she chirped as I approached. "I was hoping you'd come by to join us." "You're trespassing," I said, voice low but steady. Karen blinked, as if the word was foreign to her. "You're on my land without permission," I continued. "You didn't ask. You didn't notify. You just took." She waved a hand, as though brushing away an inconvenient fly. "Don't be so dramatic. Just a barbecue. We're building community spirit." "On my soil," I said, taking a slow step forward. "With my property. Without even the decency of a phone call." Karen glanced around, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to back down. "Look, I tried to include you. You didn't respond. I figured you wouldn't mind." "I mind." Her smile faltered. "Well, I suppose the damage is done. The party's almost over anyway. Let's not cause a scene." I stared at her, at the plastic centerpieces, the empty water bottles blowing across the field, the kids hanging off my fence like it was a jungle gym. My jaw tightened. "No," I said. "Let's not cause a scene." I turned and walked away. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anyone out. I let the party finish. Let her guests eat their fill. Let Karen believe she'd won. But inside a slow burn started. The kind that doesn't fizzle out. It simmers, grows hotter by the hour, waiting for the right time to boil over. You see, Karen thought she was clever. That she could take without consequence. That my silence meant consent. She was about to learn that farmers may be slow to act. But once we do, we don't back down. They came to my farm for a barbecue. Next week, I'd show them what a real feast looked like. One they'd never forget. The morning after the trespass, I stood on my porch with a mug of bitter coffee and a sour taste in my mouth. My land still bore the scars from the Maple Grove invasion. Crushed grass, scattered trash, and my fence gate hanging off one hinge like a broken jaw. The air still smelled faintly of propane and lighter fluid. An insult layered in smoke. Karen Wexley thought I'd do nothing. That was her mistake. She saw a quiet man in worn boots and assumed silence meant surrender. But she didn't know the kind of men and women I worked with. She didn't understand the code among people who wake up before sunrise, who grow calluses instead of egos, who break their backs to put food on other people's tables. I pulled out my old flip phone and started making calls. "Hey Russ. Got a favor to ask. Ramon, you hungry next weekend? Clarice, remember that time you said you owed me one?" By noon the plan was in motion. I didn't need revenge. I needed demonstration. Something that would make Karen and her HOA army understand that my land was not their playground. That this wasn't suburbia. That here, respect wasn't printed in newsletters. It was earned. By the end of the day, I had commitments from over 100 people. Farmhands, ranchers, mechanics, family, even a couple food truck guys I knew from the state fair. They were eager. Some out of loyalty. Some out of curiosity. But most just heard there'd be barbecue. Real barbecue. Not store-bought meat nuked on a gas grill, but slow-smoked brisket, pork shoulder, ribs soaked in spices passed down through generations. I called in every favor I had and a few I hadn't earned yet. My smoker hadn't seen this much action since the 4th of July cook-off 10 years ago. I dragged it out from under the lean-to, pressure washed the rust off, and fired it up just to hear it roar. Then I called my cousin Benny. If there was one thing Benny knew, it was how to organize chaos. "Bring the canopy tents, folding tables, and every single folding chair your church owns," I told him. "Planning a wedding or a war?" he asked, half joking. "Both," I said. "And I need enough plates to feed an army." By Wednesday, my pasture had turned into a construction site. We laid down plywood walkways, strung up lights, stacked pallets of firewood, and set out drink coolers like water stations on a marathon route. I cleared the barn of tools and hay to make room for seating. My neighbor Hank offered a mechanical bull. I didn't ask why he had one. I just said yes. I wanted it to feel like a party, but not their kind of party. Not sterile. Not curated. Ours would smell of smoke and sweat, sound like laughter and country music, and taste like the kind of food you don't forget for years. Still, I knew the crown jewel of this whole plan wasn't the ribs or the fire pits. It was the people. These weren't HOA members in matching polos or suburbanites sipping lemonade with pinkies out. These were the men and women who fixed your broken fence for a handshake, pulled your truck out of a ditch at midnight, or dropped off eggs on your porch just because you mentioned you were low. They were the soul of this place. And I wanted Karen to see exactly who she'd disrespected. That Thursday I saw her again. She was walking her designer mutt along the road that separated Maple Grove from my property. I was hanging streamers on a fence post when she stopped. Her nose scrunched at the smell of mesquite smoke. "What's all this?" she asked, tilting her head. "Barbecue," I said. "Big one. This Saturday." She looked over my shoulder at the trucks, the folding tables, the tarps covering smokers. "Another community event?" she asked, voice tight. "No," I replied. "This one's private." She bristled. Well, I hope you've taken the proper precautions. Noise ordinances, crowd control, fire safety. I mean, this sort of thing can get out of hand quickly. Appreciate the concern, I said without looking at her. But it's on my land. All above board. Karen's jaw worked like she wanted to say more, but couldn't find footing. Eventually, she huffed and walked off, her heels clicking against the asphalt like angry punctuation marks. I watched her go, then turned back to the ribbons. Let her wonder. Let her stew. Because come Saturday she'd understand. I wasn't just throwing a party. I was sending a message. Saturday arrived like a hammer strike, loud and unrelenting. Trucks rolled in just after sunrise, loaded with ice chests, gallon jugs of homemade sauce, and enough meat to feed a battalion. Benny's church group came early to set up tents. Hank brought the bull. Ramon showed up with a boombox that was older than his truck and twice as loud. By 11, the scent of mesquite smoke filled the valley. The kind of smell that stopped traffic. People began lining up before noon. Some wore cowboy hats. Others came straight from the fields in overalls. Boots stomped across gravel. Kids ran through the rows of tables, chasing each other between wheelbarrows full of sweet tea and lemonade. Someone fired up the banjo. Someone else passed around cornbread. And then, like a bad movie entrance, Karen showed up. Her Lexus crawled up the drive and stopped just short of the turnout. She stepped out, now in designer flats and a pastel blouse that didn't belong anywhere near barbecue smoke. Her sunglasses came off as she surveyed the scene, face twisted in a mixture of disbelief and horror. 100 people. On my land. Laughing. Singing. Eating food off real plates. No choice. No rules. Just community. She didn't walk any farther. Just stood there like a queen looking at a rebel kingdom. I tipped my hat from across the field. She turned and drove away. I didn't smile. Not yet. But deep down I knew. The message was received. Monday morning came with the bitter taste of ash and triumph. The ground still bore footprints from 100 boots, and my smoker sat cold and blackened like a war machine resting after battle. Folks had stayed until dusk, long after the last plate was scraped clean, trading stories under lantern light while the stars came out. I thought the message had landed. That Karen Wexley, Queen of Maple Grove, would back off. I underestimated her pride. The first sign of trouble came wrapped in a crisp white envelope tucked under my gate chain. Choi letterhead, printed in gold. Her handwriting was clinical, pointed, almost elegant, to the owner of the adjacent agricultural property. It has come to our attention that your recent event caused significant disruption to the Maple Grove community. Several residents reported noise disturbances, trespassing onto HOA-maintained trails, and obstructed traffic on the main access road. Please be advised that further disruptions will not be tolerated. The HOA will be escalating concerns to the County Zoning Board for review of agricultural land usage and potential violations. No name, no greeting, just threats in ink. I folded the letter slowly, slid it into my back pocket, and walked back to the barn. She wanted a fight. Not the kind with fists or fireworks, but with paperwork, permits, and bureaucratic nooses. The next few days made that crystal clear. On Tuesday, a county inspector showed up. Friendly enough guy, looked half apologetic as he stepped out of his government-issued SUV. Said there'd been an anonymous complaint about unsafe electrical wiring used during an unpermitted gathering. Wednesday brought a zoning review officer who poked around the fields, citing codes and scribbling in a notebook. He asked whether I had transitioned the land from agricultural to event use. I told him the only thing growing here was corn and consequences. Thursday, a formal notice arrived. Zoning review pending, subject to fines. Karen had called in the cavalry. But here's the thing about landowners. Real ones, not paper pushers or clipboard tyrants. We don't rattle easily. We plant deeper. We build stronger. That night I called my lawyer. A cousin named June. Sharp as a thistle and meaner than a cornered rooster when provoked. She thinks she can reclassify your land. June scoffed. She's out of her mind. You're zoned for mixed agricultural. You could host a wedding and run cattle through the aisle. She's trying to wear me down, I said. Wants to bury me in red tape. June chuckled. Then we'll return the favor, just with heavier paperwork. By Friday my response was in motion. We filed a formal counter-complaint to the county board outlining harassment and false claims. We documented every inch of my permitted land use. Benny's church group gave written testimonies about the safety measures. The food truck vendors submitted health inspection records. Ramon sent drone footage showing the event never crossed onto HOA land. But we weren't just going to defend. We were going to build a wall. Not literal, figurative. A line Karen couldn't cross. So I added something new to the edge of the pasture. A 10-foot wooden sign painted by hand. Private farm property. This land feeds families. Not fragile egos. I didn't name names. Didn't have to. The whole town knew. Saturday morning, I was oiling the tractor when I heard the approaching hum of tires on gravel. Not a Lexus this time. A golf cart, white with gold trim. Issued. Karen stepped out, clipboard in hand, flanked by 2 board members I'd seen before. Greg, the meek accountant type, and Sandra, who always looked like she was 5 minutes away from suing someone over a leaf on her lawn. Understood. Karen's lips were pressed so tight they might have vanished. We'd like to speak, she said. I'm listening. Greg cleared his throat. The board has received extensive feedback. Many residents feel that your response to our barbecue was aggressive. I raised an eyebrow. Didn't realize feeding farmhands counted as aggression. Karen's eyes narrowed. You're undermining community harmony. Setting a tone of hostility. Do you think that reflects well on the town? I walked over, slow, and leaned on the fence post between us. This land isn't your town, I said calmly. It's my family's legacy. And you trespassed. Lied about permission. Now you're weaponizing zoning codes to cover your guilt. Greg shifted uncomfortably. Sandra looked at the grass. Karen stayed ice cold. We could have worked together. No, I said. You could have asked. She opened her mouth to reply, then hesitated. For a moment, just a flicker, I saw something crack behind her polished exterior. Not regret. Not guilt. Embarrassment. I'd bruised her pride. And in her world that was war. We'll see what the zoning board says, she said at last. But I suggest you reconsider future retaliatory events. I smiled not unkindly. And I suggest you reconsider who you pick fights with. They left without another word. As the golf cart disappeared down the road, I exhaled slowly. The storm hadn't passed. But I'd planted something stronger than fear. Respect. And come what may, I wasn't backing down. A week passed. No word from the zoning board. No more surprise inspections. Just a quiet tension in the air, like the moment before a storm breaks. Karen was regrouping. I could feel it. And so was I. Outwardly, nothing had changed. The field still needed tending. The fence still needed patching. Life on the farm doesn't pause for politics. But beneath the surface, I was preparing for the next move. Because Karen wasn't going to let go. Not while her nameplate still sat at the head of the HOA boardroom table. And I wasn't about to let my family's land be governed by the fragile egos of suburban royalty. So I leaned in. I expanded the farm stand near the road. Brought in local honey, fresh eggs, handmade crafts from nearby ranchers. I invited school kids from town for tours. Let them feed the goats, climb the hay bales. Took photos for their parents. Posted them on the town bulletin board and local Facebook groups. This land belongs to the community, I wrote beneath each one. The real community. Karen saw it. I know she did. She didn't respond, not yet, but Maple Grove's whisper network was buzzing. I heard from the town clerk that several HOA members had quietly approached the county to ask whether Karen's complaints were overreaching. But then she escalated again. It happened on a Tuesday. I was out trimming hedgerows when I heard a chainsaw revving just beyond the west edge of the property. It wasn't mine. And it wasn't a sound that belonged to the soil. I followed the noise, cutting across rows of young squash and melon vines. As I cleared the last line of trees, I saw them. 2 contractors in fluorescent vests and a Maple Grove security guy standing over a pile of severed branches. They were trimming my trees. Karen had dispatched her people to clear overgrowth along the so-called shared boundary trail that hugged the border of my property. But they'd crossed the line, literally. Half the limbs on my old pecan tree lay in a heap, bleeding sap. "Turn that off," I barked, my voice sharper than the saw they held. One of the men flinched, shut down the motor. "We were told." "You were told wrong." The security guy, a stocky man in mirrored sunglasses, stepped forward. "HOA directive. Trail maintenance. You're encroaching on community easement." "That tree's been here longer than Maple Grove has existed," I said. "There's no easement. Not on this side of the line." He pulled out a folded HOA map. I pulled out the county surveyor's original plot records. We stared at each other over ink and paper and a pile of dying branches. "This is your only warning," I said. "You touch anything else on my land without permission, I'll press charges." He hesitated. The contractors gathered their tools and walked off in silence. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at a box of old documents. Deeds, maps, zoning rulings, even a yellowed newspaper clipping about my grandfather plowing the original fields in '67. I wasn't looking for comfort. I was preparing for war. The next morning I went to the county office myself. Spoke with a clerk. Then the registrar. Then the zoning board secretary. I had to wait through layers of polite indifference and rubber-stamped bureaucracy, but by day's end I walked out with 2 things: a certified boundary confirmation, and a copy of a land use clause that predated the HOA by 2 decades. Karen's grip had always been weak. I was about to break it entirely. That Friday I hosted a second event. Not a cookout this time, but a community harvest day. Families from town came to help pick vegetables, collect eggs, even learn how to shear sheep. Kids laughed as they chased chickens across the pasture. Teenagers took selfies beside the big red tractor. Local musicians strummed old country tunes while folks ate homemade pie at picnic tables. No alcohol. No amplified noise past dusk. Everything was by the book. And I invited the press. Small town paper. Local blog. Even a community radio station. They showed up, cameras in hand, smiling, asking questions about sustainable agriculture and local food systems. I made sure they got a good look at the big hand-painted sign I'd posted by the road. "This land is farm first. Family first. Free always." The next morning, the town's front page featured a photo of me kneeling beside a little girl holding a basket of fresh-picked cucumbers. The headline read, "The Heart of Our County. One farmer's fight to keep tradition alive." Karen must have choked on her imported tea. Because that afternoon I got a letter. Not from her but from Greg, the meek board member. Hand-delivered, not printed. Just a single sentence. "Some of us would like to talk. Just us. No board. No titles." It wasn't surrender. But it was a crack. That evening, Greg and 2 other Maple Grove residents came by. They weren't wearing the usual smug expressions. They looked tired, worn out, like people caught in a fight they never signed up for. "We didn't know she went after your zoning," Greg said. "We thought you were just being stubborn about the first party." "She trespassed," I said. Then tried to bury me under legal noise to make it seem like I was the problem. They nodded. "We want peace," said Sandra, the same one who'd stood beside Karen in that golf cart. "Not another headline. Not another fight." "Then rein her in," I said. "Because if she keeps pushing, I'm going to start inviting every local news outlet to every crop I plant. And I guarantee you, the HOA won't survive the attention." They left with more respect than when they'd arrived. That night I didn't celebrate. I sharpened my tools. Re-oiled the gate hinges. Watered the young pecan sapling I'd planted beside the butchered one. Because Karen hadn't backed down yet. But now she was standing alone. And soon it would be her empire. Not mine. That started to rot from the roots. The sun was barely up when the final blow landed. I was in the field, boots wet with dew, checking the irrigation lines when June, my cousin, my lawyer, my steel-willed secret weapon, pulled into the driveway in her dust-covered Jeep. She stepped out holding a thick yellow envelope. "She made one mistake too many," June said, handing it over. "The county zoning board ruled this morning." Opened it. Inside was a stamped letter. Official. Cold. Final. The Maple Grove Homeowners Association is hereby cited for unauthorized interference with private agricultural property, misrepresentation of zoning ordinances, and overreach of jurisdiction. Furthermore, the board's complaint regarding noise, traffic, and safety violations has been dismissed for lack of merit. The zoning board recommends immediate review of HOA internal governance. I read it twice. Then once more. Karen had lost. No, she'd buried herself. Later that morning, I watched from the edge of my porch as a gray Mercedes glided through the neighborhood gate, turned slowly down the main road, and stopped outside the Maple Grove Community Center. Karen stepped out alone, clipboard under her arm, sunglasses perched like armor across her face. It was HOA meeting day. But this one wasn't like the others. Because now, the homeowners weren't afraid of her. They were tired, embarrassed, angry, others ashamed. Greg had called a special vote. Karen didn't see it coming. Inside, the meeting was short, brutal, efficient. A motion was raised to censure the HOA chair for exceeding her authority and exposing the community to legal risk. It passed with overwhelming support. Then came the second motion, removal. Karen didn't even fight it. She just stared at the table as the hands went up. Greg's, Andra's, even the old man who once yelled at kids for chalk drawings on the sidewalk. A moment later, the gavel came down. Karen Wexley was out. That afternoon, she returned to her home, house number 7, the one with the imported stone path and the ornamental koi pond, and sat on her porch alone. No one came to see her. She didn't wave when I passed on the tractor. She didn't speak when the mail truck delivered another HOA violation, this time addressed to her. That weekend, she put the house up for sale. No public statement. No apology. Just a sign in the yard that read, "Luxury home. Quiet neighborhood." I didn't gloat. I didn't knock on her door. But I did host one final gathering. A neighbor's harvest dinner. Kept it simple. Tables under the stars. String lights overhead. Food from local vendors. Music from a fiddle and an old upright bass. No banners. No speeches. Just people. Real people. Farmers. Shopkeepers. Teachers. Kids chasing fireflies. Even Greg showed up, his sleeves rolled and a pie in hand. Sandra brought sweet tea and homemade cookies. The same residents who once avoided my eyes now laughed around my fire pit, eating cornbread and brisket like we'd been neighbors all along. That night, someone raised a toast. It wasn't me. It was Ramon, the same man who'd been thrown off my land by Karen just weeks earlier. "To land that grows more than crops," he said. "To land that grows truth." The table went quiet. Then glasses clinked. I looked around, the flicker of lanterns casting warm light over weathered hands and smiling faces, and I realized something. This wasn't just about a barbecue. It never had been. It was about dignity. About the invisible line between stewardship and entitlement. Between community and control. Karen had tried to colonize something she never understood. And in doing so, she reminded everyone else what really mattered. A month later, I found a small package on my porch. No return label. Just a note inside written in elegant, precise script. "I underestimated you. I overestimated myself. The farm deserves better than I gave it. So do the people around it. I hope the next place I live teaches me something too. KW." There wasn't an apology in those lines. But there was something like truth. I placed the letter in a drawer next to the original zoning permit and the photo of my grandfather harvesting wheat in '72. Then I walked outside, past the new sapling beside the broken pecan, and into the field that had been here long before Karen, and would be here long after. A gentle breeze passed through the crops. The land didn't speak. But it didn't need to. Had been heard.